Hello, everybody, and welcome into another season preview show here at the Hockey Writers YouTube channel. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and we are up to the New Jersey Devils here as we continue through the teams and until we get to the regular season, which is coming up really quickly. I got Daniel here. Daniel, how's it going?
Hey, Matt, how you doing? Thanks for having me, and I think I speak for everyone here. We're just looking forward to the puck dropping because it's felt pretty dragging.
You're telling me it seems like the offseason just gone on forever. It seems like it was a year ago we had hockey or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, we're only a few weeks away from training camp starting. A couple weeks actually, if you're looking at it as when we're recording this, and preseason will be here before you know it, and then regular season, which it's coming up quickly too. So we're gonna preview the New Jersey Devils season coming up. And I mean, throughout the offseason, they didn't really make a ton of changes. They did sign a couple free agents right at the beginning there. Like a lot of other teams, seems like there's been no free agents signed since around the first week of July. But they did add a couple of names. And one guy that came over from Europe actually had a pretty good returning to the NHL as well. So let's start there with the forwards. And we got a few names here: Evgenii Dadonov, Connor Brown, and Juho Lammikko. I don't know about Lammikko's role. I know you'll probably touch on him there. What do you think about these new additions? A couple guys that have some history of scoring goals. Dadonov had a really good season last, with the Dallas Stars, which I was kind of surprised he didn't re-sign there. But what do you think about these new guys?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Devils last season, their biggest issue, I think, by far was depth scoring. Aside from the top two lines, they got virtually no help or not nearly enough. And I think that's exactly what Tom Fitzgerald knew he had to address and what he did address. Bring in Dadonov, like you said, had a great. He's someone who you're not going to be getting point per game production from him, but he will be very solid. He will do his job, do what he needs to, and chip in from time to time. I think he had 20 goals last season. That's way more than the Devils got from a lot of the guys in their bottom six. So you kind of just know what you're going to get. And I think an underrated portion of that move is that the Devils have Arseny Gritsyuk coming in, who Devils fans have their hopes very high for. And similarly, Russian, he'll be able to kind of take him under his wing. And that's something that is very, very important to an NHL team when you have this young prospect who's having to move halfway across the world and start a new life, basically. So to have that mentor in Dadonov there, because I don't believe there are any other Russians on the Devils roster besides Dadonov, that's a big thing. So, Dadonov's going to be great. And same kind of deal with Connor Brown, the guy who is playing on the first line with Connor McDavid in the Stanley Cup final. He's been there, done that. He's not going to produce earth-shattering offensive numbers, but he'll chip in from time to time, and you could rely on him. And Brown is also stellar on the penalty kill, which the Devils' penalty kill was great in the regular season, struggled a bit in the playoffs. But adding someone like Brown to that mix is just going to continue to cement them as an elite team on the PK, and we know that's a very important facet of the game. And then Juho Lammikko, like you mentioned, Tom Fitzgerald in his July presser seemed pretty high on him. He got a one-way deal, so he's making a lot more money than a lot of other guys in the AHL if he were to be there. I do think, and from everything Fitz said, I think he's going to carve out a role on that fourth line. He's done it successfully in the past. He played in, I could be wrong, I believe he played in Switzerland last season. And he's someone who is a bigger guy, kind of plays with that edge, can chip in from time to time. Obviously, Matt, you're familiar with him. So, another guy who, not an earth-shattering move, but the Devils have those top scorers, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Timo Meier, I could go on. But the depth scoring was just not there, and being able to bring in some of those guys who you can rely on night in and night out, and I'm sure we'll get into it. They let some guys walk who were around for the past few years and just weren't getting the job done. So it was a thing that Fitzgerald needed to address. He obviously made that very clear, not just by his words prior to free agency starting, but once free agency began, bringing in these guys. So depth is very important. We know that. We see that with the Florida Panthers constantly. and the Devils definitely did a great job in addressing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lammikko was really good a few years ago, where he was playing with Tyler Mott and Matthew Highmore on a very good fourth line for the Canucks that season. And if you go back to, there's an article that still circulates on the Hockey Writers, which is an archive that keeps coming out. See, people seem to like reading it about that line. And a few years ago, where I said they're going to be a good playoff line. Unfortunately, they never got an opportunity to be a good playoff line. But yeah, he was really good for the Canucks that season, and I was actually sad to see him leave. The Canucks was only one season he played, and yeah, I think he could be an underrated addition to the Devils this season for sure. All right, let's talk about the rest of the forward group, which, like you mentioned, a bunch of those names. Jack Hughes, hopefully, will be healthy all season because he's just such a big part of the team that he was out for like half the season, it seemed. And he had such a great start too. So what do you think about big storylines, question marks, stuff like that for the forward group?
Yeah, I mean, Jack Hughes' health is far and away the number one thing. He's just so dynamic offensively. He was on pace, I believe, to have a 100-point season. He would have been the first Devil ever to do so. And then he goes down, and the thing that's I'm sure is very frustrating for him, but just frustrating in general, is that it was unavoidable. He kind of got tangled up with Jack Eichel in Vegas, and before you know it, shoulder injury, out the rest of the season. In the past, he's been criticized for maybe not having enough muscle mass, not protecting himself well. But this was a completely different scenario in that there was nothing he could have done to avoid that. So it was just unfortunate timing. He was having a great season, staying healthy up until then. But now, because it's happened, I believe most of the seasons he's played, he's dealt with an injury that's caused him to lose at least a decent chunk of time, save for the 2022-23 season. There's always going to be that question: can Jack Hughes stay healthy, whether it's an unavoidable injury or not? So for his sake and the Devil's sake, it would be best if he stayed healthy the entire season and produced that offense that we all know he can produce. He's just such an elite player. He could dish it, he could shoot it. I mean, he could absolutely fly. I always take a look back to his scouting report before he got drafted that said on elite prospects, Jack Hughes can do things that it was something along the lines of that even birds can't fathom. So, pretty highly touted guy there. And yeah, we all know what he can do. It's just a matter of staying healthy. So that's the biggest thing. The second biggest thing, which we kind of touched on, is the depth scoring. It absolutely came back to bite them last season, and especially because I kind of think there was a little too much pressure on Tom Fitzgerald, because up until Christmas, they were getting that depth scoring. Guys like Stefan Nason, Paul Cotter, Dawson Mercer, Eric Holla were chipping in, and then they all kind of fell off at once after the new year, and that's when it was hard to judge by the trade deadline. It was like, did they just have a bad month and a half, or is this who they really are? So shoring up those bottom six spots is obviously a big thing, and that's going to be huge so that the top six guys don't feel like they have to put the team on their back every night, because everyone's allowed to have some rough nights. You can't expect these top guys to chip in and day out. There's going to be rough nights. So that's the second biggest thing for me. And then Arseny Gritsyuk coming in has a chance to completely overhaul the offense. You look at someone who I compare it to when the Devils brought in Yegor Sharangovich over the COVID season, and he was tearing up Russia, and tearing up the KHL and Belarus, and Gritsyuk had better numbers than him in the KHL. He's someone who's very responsible defensively as well, has quite the motor. The tools are there to be a very successful NHL player, and adding that extra punch for the Devils would be, on top of the depth guys they add in the forward group, would be absolutely ginormous. I know Devils fans are so extremely excited for him. Saw that he just arrived to New Jersey a couple days ago, got his first New Jersey diner experience. And he's picking up English pretty quickly as well, according to the article the Devils put out today. So, someone who, if you're a Devils fan, obviously you never know how points are going to translate from the KHL to the NHL, but he was near a point per game over there and a very mature forward. Obviously, different situations, but he played on the same team as Ivan Demidov and outperformed him. And Demidov got less ice time. He's younger, so it's not directly comparable. But I mean, that's high end talent you're comparing him to, and he was far outpacing Demidov. So yeah, Gritsuk has that ability to turn the Devils from possibly like a bubble playoff contender to a team that can easily be in. He has that type of skill set. I put out an article a few weeks ago that fans should temper expectations because some were expecting him to score 70 points and immediately be this elite guy. But even if he could give you 35, 40, what that can do to the Devils offense, considering all the top end talent they have and the additions they made, that would be a huge thing. So I know Devils fans are very excited for Arseny Gritsuk, and I can completely understand why.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the depth scoring. He can add to that too, right? If he can hit right away. So, I mean, yeah, tempering expectations. Is still a young player. He hasn't played in the NHL yet, but I mean, look at how Demidov. I mean, yes, very small sample size too, but he seems to be pretty good in the NHL already. I think he could probably do the same thing. So we'll see. That's going to be interesting to follow for sure. All right, let's shift to the back end. And as of this recording, Luke Hughes still hasn't signed his contract for this season. So we'll hopefully get an answer to that pretty quickly. But I mean, other than that, there's no new additions to the defense. I mean, Kalen Addison, he played in the AHL last season. I don't know if he's going to really add to the mix, but unless I missed anyone, they're bringing back pretty much the same defense core. So what are the storylines going in? And you're probably going to mention Luke Hughes is a big one right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get Luke Hughes out of the way. I personally don't believe that that's that big of a deal. We saw this movie last season with Dawson Mercer, and that actually took a day or two of training camp and then finally got resolved. But I mean, Luke Hughes isn't going anywhere. He can't even be offer sheeted. It's just a matter of hammering out those final details, and I understand where some frustrations could lie because GM Tom Fitzgerald said that it was his number one priority, and that was 2 months ago now. So, but at the same time, it's going to get done. Luke Hughes is going to be a Devil for a very long time, and he will be a very dynamic player. He had 20 points in his last 22 games, so he was starting to slowly cement himself as one of the elite offensive defensemen in the league, obviously one of the fastest. And if he could be anything close to what Quinn Hughes is, his brother, he's going to be a very, very good player in the National Hockey League. So I don't think that's too much of a worry. But there is more of a worry. Jonathan Kovacevic, who was so great for the Devils last season, rightfully earned an extension. Won't be ready, injured his knee in the playoffs. They don't have an exact timeline, but he definitely will not be ready for the start of the season. So that also opens up another question. Simon Nemec. There's been a lot of I can't even say controversy, but a lot of chatter around his name over the past few months. He expressed some displeasure being in the AHL, got called up, didn't do very well in the regular season, but then the playoffs rolled around and he showed every bit of why he was a number 2 overall pick. Just completely changed the narrative of his entire season. And Devils fans are now really excited for him. So it's a question of who is he? Was he on just a heater, and is he more of the guy that didn't perform well in the regular season? Is the playoffs version of him someone who the Devils will get long-term and be an elite two-way guy in the National Hockey League? It's hard to tell with such a small sample, but the skills and tools are there. We saw that in the playoffs. So it seems like my guess would be Seamus Casey is in the mix as well, but I would think that Nemec is going to get the shot to fill Kovacevic's spot until he gets back. But also with Casey as well, that they have a lot of pieces, and there's only 6 spots in the lineup. 7 if you go 11-7, but that's not something any team should do too consistently. Casey's another guy taken out of the U.S. program who has elite offensive skills, but the defensive side is certainly still a work in progress. He's an undersized defenseman, and there's still work to be done there. He showed flashes of dominance at the NHL level, but even at the AHL level, he could have done better on the defensive side of the puck, and even offensively, he shot way his shooting percentage was way lower in the AHL than the NHL. So he was on, you could consider, a bit of a luck spree. I think he shot like 33% in the NHL, which is obviously not sustainable, but he can be an elite talent, but it's a question of where does he fit, because the Devils basically have all their right shot defensemen locked up. Dougie Hamilton, Brett Pesce, and Jonathan Kovacevic, and then you have Nemitz there on top of it. So Casey's basically the fifth guy. Can he leapfrog Nemitz? Maybe he has a good preseason. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But the Devils, I think, have a decision on their hands. I don't see a world where by the trade deadline, Nemitz and Casey are both on the NHL squad, just because they're too talented and there's not enough playing time for them. So it's almost like this puzzle, and maybe there will be injuries and it's easier for the Devils to figure out. Obviously, you don't wish injury on anyone, but it's becoming, I would say, a borderline issue now, just in the sense that these players were drafted a while ago and they seem like they're ready to be in an NHL lineup, but is the Devils lineup the place where they'll be able to do that for a long career? I don't know for certain. So that's another big storyline. And then with the defense as well, it was a very confusing, puzzling season last season. They started off and appeared dominant. They went on a run where they had a few games, I think it was in late November, early December, where they were shutting down the opposition at a historical level. Like, they were allowing like 14, 15 shots a game. Even Sheldon Keefe said, like, yeah, they're going to regress a little bit. They're not going to be this good for this long. But they were just, I mean, they look like the old Trap Devils, where they just were completely dominating the other team. And then the new year came, and you're going to sense this recurring theme. The new year is kind of where things started to go south for the Devils last season. They kind of struggled, and their results were still okay. They ended in even strength goals. I believe they were 10th in goals allowed. So they were still a top 10 team, but I think a lot of that goes to goaltending as well. I don't know how much I put that on the defense. They were good. I would consider them above average for sure, but Devils fans want to win now. I think that's very clear. And the Devils, I mean, they locked up some of these guys a while ago now. They're in their contention window, and they've only won one playoff series in that said window. So, how is it going to shake out? I'm not 100% sure, but I can't say with 100% confidence that the defense is at cup contender level. They'll be good, but there's some question marks too. I mean, Kovacevic coming back from his injury, he was such a huge part of that team last season. Jonas Siegenthaler, one of the better defensive defensemen in the league, but he's kind of had this off year on year kind of track. He was great last season. Can he replicate that? And then to cap it all off, you have Dougie Hamilton, who was floated around in some quote-unquote trade rumors this offseason, is still a Devil at this moment. And he can be a very large part. We saw in 22-23 that he was the driving force for the entire Devils team. When Dougie Hamilton was going, the Devils as a whole were going. But he struggled to stay healthy throughout his entire Devils tenure. And fans are wondering, like, is it near the end? Is Dougie Hamilton going to bounce back? Because I'm sure he was frustrated with his season last season. Production took a dip, but that largely goes hand in hand with the inability to stay on the ice. He's someone who certainly has that ability, but is it still there? I don't know. And it's something the Devils are going to have to figure out as well, especially with that cap hit, because they're in a pretty tight cap situation. I would imagine that's the biggest reason why this Luke Hughes contract is taking so long. Not a lot of wiggle room, even with that cap rising this season. So I'll go back to say they certainly, I think this Devils team is no question making the playoffs, but there's those little storylines like we saw with the forward group, with the defense, they need a lot to go right to be able to completely take off. And they have the talent. If they stay healthy, they can do it. But they need a lot of chips to fall in place, and especially with their defense.
Yeah, I mean, they have some good pieces, like you said, and it's just that there's some little things that need to be fixed, and we'll see if that is. I mean, they have the potential to be good. It's just can they? The biggest thing is the health. I mean, especially with Kovacevic, and hopefully he's not out for too long, and that he can come back. And it doesn't take too long for him to get back up to 100%. But yeah, injuries always just throw wrenches into everything. That's why you look at on paper they're good, but then the injuries happen, and then all of a sudden you're scrambling. So we'll see what happens there. All right, look at the goaltending, and this is a pretty good tandem. Jake Allen returns as the backup. It wasn't completely sure that was going to happen, but Jacob Markstrom obviously still the starter there, and he had a really good season, even though, I mean, I'd say pretty good season last year. What do you think about the tandem going in?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to complain about this tandem. They were both so phenomenal. And actually, if you look at expected numbers, Jake Allen was one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League last season, and he was the Devils' backup. Markstrom was great in his own right, but Allen really just shut the door whenever he came. And the fact that he was able to lock up with the Devils and seems like will retire as a Devil based on his age in that term, that's a huge thing for the Devils. It's just two veterans. You kind of know what you're going to get from them. I probably said this exact same thing in last year's season preview, in that I compare goaltenders to relief pitchers in baseball. They could be so dominant one season and then just completely flub the next. So you never truly know. But at the same time, Markstrom and Allen are as sure of a bet as you're going to get. Neither of them are Vezina caliber, but they're going to keep you in games. They're going to do their job as long as they're healthy. I at least fully believe that. So I think goaltending is the Devil's strong suit. For a couple seasons, it wasn't. And Tom Fitzgerald did an excellent job of making sure that's not the case anymore, because you could nitpick whatever you want with the skaters, but you're in every game if you have good goaltending, period. And the Devils do have that. So I really think that Markstrom and Allen, and I mentioned they're veterans. Like they play off each other super well. Allen's not the guy that's going to be clamoring for more starts. He's going to be like, I'm here when you need me. Just a consummate professional. And Markstrom is someone who we saw in the playoffs against Carolina is capable of fully standing on his head in an intense playoff series. So absolutely, goaltending is a strong suit for the Devils as long as they're healthy.
Yeah, I mean, Jake Allen really not that far removed from being a starter with the Montreal Canadiens. So, I mean, he can step in even if Markstrom does go down, which you hope doesn't happen. But he's a guy that you're not going to be like, oh no, we're going to be we're going to struggle now because we have to put our backup in. Allen can definitely carry the mail for a while, and you hope it's not for a long time if Markstrom does go down. But yeah, it is a very good tandem, and Markstrom can be Vezina caliber at times too. He showed that in Calgary. So I mean, we'll see how that goes. But I agree. I think they're definitely a strength going into this season. All right, let's go to the division, and it is a very tough. I mean, I don't know. I mean, some people say it's tough. Some people say it's a weak division, and I still think there's a lot of there's a lot of question marks, I think, with some teams. What do you think? Where do the Devils stack up here?
I mean, I think everyone's kind of in the same boat. You look at the Penguins, who are getting older. I mean, they're kind of a little out of the picture now, at least I think. But you have the Capitals, the Rangers, even the Islanders, teams that can be very good, but it's certainly not a lock. I think the only team that's a lock to make a Metro playoff spot is the Carolina Hurricanes. Obviously they made some moves, locked up some of their core guys. They're going to be very good, and they are such a thorn in the Devil's side. It seems like every time the Devil, especially when they're in Carolina, the Devils just can't win in Carolina. I mean, it's really a struggle. They matched up against them pretty well in the playoffs, given all the injuries they had. but still Carolina is just, they have the Devils number. So I would not be surprised in the slightest if Carolina finished first in the Metro. But then you have kind of the Capitals, the Rangers, the Devils, maybe even the Islanders, and even the Blue Jackets, honestly. I mean, the Blue Jackets are a very young, gritty, underrated team who certainly have a lot of skill on their roster. I could see any of those teams, all those teams battling for those Metro spots. So I think everyone's kind of in the same boat. I know Devils fans probably won't be very happy if they're pushed down to a wild card berth, given that they're still in their contention window. But I think it will be a tough division as long as those teams are healthy. I mean, we saw what the Capitals did last season, just completely tore it up. And yeah, I mean, Alex Ovechkin on his own could carry a team even at his current age. But yeah, the I think everyone's in the same boat. The Metro, I don't know if I'd call it a tough division, but I certainly wouldn't call it a weak division.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talent there, and the Devils, I think what it comes down to is how they play at home. Last season, they kind of struggled a bit at home, which should be their strength, and the crowd was usually into it. It certainly wasn't like fans weren't showing up and showing out. If they could play well against those Metro teams at home, because they lost so many key Metro matchups at home last season, aside from the Rangers, they dominated the Rangers, but some key Capitals games, the game to the Hurricanes, they need to take advantage of those home battles. So then maybe if you lose a couple on the road, it's not the end of the world. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. But yeah, super, super competitive division. And the Devils can certainly be up there, but just like everything else I've said, definitely not a lock.
Yeah, it's true. I think, everyone's kind of writing. I don't know why everyone's kind of writing off maybe a bit the Capitals. I mean, they did win the East. They won the Eastern Conference. But they're kind of like, oh, they're not kind of, maybe that was a flash in the pan because Ovechkin, they were pushing to him for him to, get the all-time lead in goals. And that was their motivation to be really good. I don't know. I think they could be still pretty good. Anytime Ovechkin's on the team, you can't really write them off. And they've got some good young guys too. I think the Capitals are still going to be in that conversation as being at the top of the division. So I don't know about winning it. I think the Hurricanes are probably the favorite right now. And even the Rangers, though, everyone's kind of run because of how bad they were last season. They still got a ton of talent on that team. I mean, JT Miller returns to his 100-point form. I mean, you don't know. I mean, they also got some great pieces that they could still be really good. And again, Shesterkin there too. I think the Rangers are being a little written off too as being a powerhouse in the division. But like I say at the beginning, there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of questions in this division of what teams how they're going to go, and the Devils are part of it too. Of Jack Hughes staying healthy. If he stays healthy, they have a much better chance of being in that conversation. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch this division this season. All right, quick fire round, and these are all just quick questions, 1 or 2 sentence answers here. So the first one, biggest question mark, and we've probably mentioned it already, biggest storyline or question mark going into this season?
I think it's the health of Jack Hughes, no question. I mean, he's the engine that drives the whole thing. It has to be the health of Jack Hughes.
Yeah, 100%. Like I say, if he's healthy, the Devils are a much better team for sure. All right, breakout stars. Who do you see breaking out this season?
I'll give a more common answer first in Luke Hughes. Like I said, 20 points in his last 22 games, and he's someone just on the eye test alone, and the analytics will back it up, that he was really starting to establish himself as one of the better offensive defensemen in the league. And then this is definitely a much more underrated one, or not as talked about, Paul Cotter. He's someone who certainly has all the tools, and Sheldon Keefe has said it constantly, the tools to be an elite player. I mean, he's one of the fastest guys in the game. He has insane hands. It feels like he scores every single time he's put out in the shootout. And he throws the body around too. He broke the Devils single season all-time hits record. For some reason, it just doesn't click fully, and he's still finding himself on the fourth line, but he's made some plays last season that very few players in the National Hockey League could make. And if he just puts it all together, I could certainly see him being a guy who could score 20, 25 goals, maybe 50, 55 points, and be a borderline elite player. I think he can break out because the skill's undeniable.
Yeah, I mean, Cotter, he had a great season with the Golden Knights there. It started looking like he could have been top six guy, and then gets traded to the Devils. He's kind of bouncing around, but he definitely has the ability. And who knows, it could be this season that he becomes hits that potential for sure. All right, the other side of it, players that need to bounce back from last season. Who's the biggest one?
I don't know if everyone fully realizes it because of the counting numbers, but Stefan Nason after the new year really struggled. He did not have a single even strength goal in the calendar year of 2025. I believe up until that point he had 8 or 9, and then he scored a bunch on the power play as well. He's still an asset on the power play, but he showed from October to December that he could also be dynamic at even strength, and that just didn't happen after the new year. So if he could get himself going in that regard, we've talked about the depth scoring. That's just another guy who can chip in and take some of the weight off the top players and really help the Devils out.
We talked about Nason, of course. He was a new addition in the last season's preview, and we talked about him being a really big asset because of how good he was with the Hurricanes. And he did start off well, but then kind of fell off. So hopefully he can be consistent this season. All right, let's go to potential X factors. This could be a player or a situation, wherever you want to go with this. What do you got?
I'll give you two answers. The first is, again, got to be Jack Hughes. I mean, he's just so dynamic that if he can stay healthy, he's certainly an X factor. And also Arseny Gritsuk. If he's a guy who is capable of, I mean, you look at Sharangovic's first season with the Devils, that alone you would probably take out of Gritsuk. But if he could be like a 55, 60, 65 point guy and follow more of a path of like a Kaprizov coming over from the KHL, I mean, even if he's not that good, even if he's close, just a completely different offense, getting the Devils, because odds are with their cap, even though they might need another top 6 winger, if Gritsuk can be that guy, they're one of the best offenses in the National Hockey League, if not the best, no question. So, I would say Gritsuk is a huge X factor.
Yeah, from what you say, I mean, that's if he can hit, like I say, if he hit right away, he's definitely a big deal. That's an added offense that you didn't have last season for sure. All right, well, speaking of prospects, rookies, who do you see as maybe a surprise to make the team, and no one's kind of talking about as being that right now?
Well, I think it's going to be a little difficult for really anyone that is out of the picture. But if there was one guy I would think would have the best chance, it would be, funny I said chance, Shane LeChance, who came over from the Oilers at the trade deadline. And I do think he has a slight chance to make the roster. He's someone, saw him at development camp. He makes his living in front of the net. His ceiling is probably like a bottom 6 guy who just scores gritty goals, uses his physical frame. He made a living out of it at BU. Boston University, and I think he has the talent to do that at the NHL level. I know some scouts have compared him to like a Nathan Bastian type who is on the Devils the last few seasons, but more of an offensive ceiling. If that is the case, and he's someone who could chip in maybe 12, 13, 14 goals, being an asset on the power play and using his body on the fourth line, I would not be surprised whatsoever. I mean, he's a big boy. He's absolutely huge, and I'm sure intimidating to play against. And just based on the tools he has, he's someone who can sneak on the fourth line. And I don't even know if you consider him a prospect because he's had a cup of coffee the last 2 seasons. But Brian Hallinan as well has been far and away the Devils' best scorer in the AHL the past couple seasons. And he just hasn't stuck at the NHL level, hasn't been given much of a chance. I don't think he's ever played more than 3 games in a season. And this could possibly be the season. It's the last year of his deal where Hallinan becomes a mainstay NHLer. It would not surprise me, especially if someone like Juho Lammikko ends up underperforming a bit and doesn't make the team. I could see Hallinan as someone who would slot in on that fourth line as well.
Right. Well, there's two guys to watch in training camp for sure. As far as other prospects, I mean, these guys aren't necessarily going to make the team this season, but the Devils have a pretty good prospect pool. They've still got some really good guys kind of in and about. I know one guy that is really good. You'll probably mention. Who should everyone be watching this season?
Well, I think the number one is Mikhail Yegorov at Boston University.
Exactly what I was going to say.
He, first of all, has to have, even though he's not in the NHL, the second he makes his debut, I would consider him the best personality in the league. I mean, that guy just laughs, and he's just the most bubbly human being I have ever come across. And he deserves it with the way he's played. He just absolutely took the college hockey world by storm at Boston University. We didn't even know if he'd be at BU at all, let alone almost bring them to a national championship. Tom Fitzgerald said when I asked him about him that teams were even inquiring about him at the deadline. He's a name that floated around. So Yegorov is just he seems like he has the tools to be a number one netminder in the NHL, and he was tremendous at development camp as well. Almost looked like a man amongst boys at dev camp. So I think he's someone who will really cement himself this season as, I mean, he's already considered one of the best goaltending prospects, but maybe even the best this season. Lenny Haminaho as well, coming over from the Finnish Liga, is someone who had a stellar season. I kind of compare him to Tyler Toffoli, goal-scoring winger, and he will now be playing in Utica, coming stateside for the first time. So there's an opportunity for him to kind of cement himself and show, hey, like maybe the NHL is pretty close in my rearview mirror. He certainly has the shot to do so. The knock on him was his Naho is certainly someone who can kind of force the Devils' hands in the same way Dawson Mercer did a few years back. And like, hey, like we planned on having this guy in the AHL, but maybe not for long because he's pretty good. So yeah, Haminaho, absolutely someone to keep an eye on. Anton Salayev as well will likely be coming stateside, former number 10 overall pick. And he has done pretty well in the KHL. There's still some work to be done because he's still growing into his body. He's 6'7". But if he compares himself to Victor Hedman, if he could be even close to what Victor Hedman is, the Devils are going to be in trouble for a long time. So he's likely going to come stateside after the KHL season wraps up, and that would be a huge thing for the Devils. Maybe would probably go to Utica first, but down the road, someone who could be a staple of the team defense, and for a long time, because obviously still a while until he makes his NHL debut, but definitely someone to keep an eye on because he's 6'7", but scouts say he skates like he's 5'10", which is pretty crazy. And seeing that in person, I can confirm. It's pretty. He's a unicorn, really. There's no one who's 6'7" that skates like him. It's pretty insane. So exciting name to keep an eye on. Those are probably the biggest three. But also I would keep an eye out on Ben Kivan and Conrad Fondrick, who both have a chance to make Team USA at the World Juniors. They will be playing college hockey this season. Got both of them in the second round of this past draft. And both of them, obviously, never a sure bet in the second round, but the Devils' last few second-round picks, Seamus Casey, Lenny Haminaho, and Mikhail Yegorov. So they have a tendency to strike some big names lately in that second round, and even if one of Kivan or Fondrick pan out, Devils are in a very good spot. So, those are definitely two other names to keep an eye on. World Junior is always a fun time of year, and if the Devils have prospects for Devils fans, that makes it even more exciting.
For sure, yeah, all great names. Yegorov, he just as a spoiler, he is in the top 10 prospects for goaltenders. My updated list, which is coming out in a couple days here, but. So impressive. I mean, that guy is just, he was on the honorable mentions before, but now he's made it into the top 10. So if he keeps going like this, he's going to rise that list pretty quickly. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on. right now. All right. For the Devils, this could be easy or might not be because hopefully it is easy because if Jack Hughes is healthy, he'll be in this. Who is going to lead the team in scoring this season? Forwards and defense. You can break it down by goals and points for the forwards if you want to do that.
Well, before anything, I'll break it down by family because there is one family and one family only, the Hughes family, that will be taking the entirety of this. I think Jack Hughes, if he's healthy, and we're going to knock on wood here and say he will be, he is eclipsing 100 points for the first time in Devils history. I could see him having a 40-60 season, and obviously that completely changes the dynamic of the entire team. So I can see Jack Hughes eclipsing 100 points, and Luke Hughes, maybe not a huge step forward, but I mean, he had 40-something points last season. I could see him scoring 55 this season, maybe even 60. And I think certainly he'll outperform Dougie Hamilton and start to become, I mean, he already was becoming the Devils' true number one offensive defenseman. He started quarterbacking the first power play last season, which always used to be Hamilton's job. And I think he's going to run away with it this season. And maybe not to the level of Quinn Hughes yet, but he can certainly be near a point per game, maybe 3/4 of a point per game. Someone who's just dynamic, elite offensively, and maybe even push to make Team USA in the Olympics. So yeah, the Hughes family, I mean, it's just still so crazy that the family has 3 first-round picks, 3 very good ones, and 2 of them on the same team and possibly the 2 leaders in scoring. That'd be a pretty cool storyline, and I certainly think the Hughes brothers will be towards the top. They will be at the top in team scoring.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, Luke makes the Team USA. They could all play together, which would be great. Yeah. And hopefully that's the only time Quinn Hughes is not leaving Vancouver. But that's another story. All right, let's go to some bold predictions or hot take. What do you got for this?
Arseny Gritsuk will win the Calder Trophy.
It's a good one. I like that. He could do it. That's just very bold, though. There's so many other guys that have more favorite. But, but like you say, if he hits, he definitely could be in that conversation. So that's a good, bold prediction for sure. All right. Well, thanks Daniel, for coming on and talking Devils for this season preview. We're getting there. It's only a few weeks away. We got to have some hockey on TV this month, which is something we haven't had, seems like a year, like I said. But make sure to check out everything at thehockeywriters.com. We got so much preview content on the site already and lots more to come as training camp and preseason get going. Check out our Substack. Check out our YouTube channel with the rest of the previews. You want to take a look at other teams and any other videos we got on that. But until our next preview, we will see you next time.